allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Moeller, roll call please.
Dr. Powers, Ms. Scott,
Present.
Mrs. Wise,
Present.
Mr. Irwin,
Here.
Mrs. Killian,
Present.
Mrs. Lohr,
Present.
Ms. Lauer.
Present. This evening, we're going to review and discuss the process for general obligation bonds of 2022, but before we get started, I just want to remind the audience that if you'd like to speak at any point during this process or the normal agenda, to sign up with Catherine out in the hallway, and we'll make sure to have that information, and if you have questions while you speak, we can get back to you. Thank you.
President Killian, Superintendent Hayworth, members of the Board of School Trustees. Tonight we are holding a project hearing regarding the issuance of $5,815,000 in general obligation bonds. These bonds would be used to fund HVAC, paving, and site improvement projects, including roofing, throughout the district, and provide funds for the purchase of equipment and technology. If anyone in the audience is interested in speaking at this meeting, please make sure you have signed the sign-in sheet in the hallway, and please include your name and address on that form. After a brief presentation, there will be an opportunity for the public to make comments about the projects discussed. The notice of this hearing was published on June 16, 2022 in the Tribune-Star as required by law. Pursuant to Indiana Code 20-26-7-37, before a school corporation spends more than $1 million to build, repair, or alter a school building, and such improvements will be financed by a lease or bonds, it must hold a public hearing to explain the potential use and the financial impact of the project to the community. Tonight's public hearing and the adoption of the project resolution and other items is the first step in the legal process, with the project resolution establishing the financial terms for the proposed projects. The 2022 $5.8 million GO bonds would be the sixth in a series of short-term bond issuances that started back in 2017. These borrowings were intended to supplement school corporation capital projects or operations funds used for projects capital in nature that were impacted by the loss of funding due to the imposition of circuit breaker tax cap credits. As you know, the school corporation loses in excess of $6 million annually now, and as a result of these tax cap credits. The school corporation has worked with Martin Riley Architects to develop corporation-wide roofing, paving, and HVAC repair and replacement plans. Each year, these plans are revisited and updated to reflect the most accurate building conditions, and specifications for projects are then developed and bids are solicited pursuant to Indiana bidding guidelines. Funds from this GO bond would be used to address projects slated for completion during the 2023 calendar year, with bid documents released later in 22 and bids awarded early in 2023. Currently, we anticipate that these bonds would be sold in August, so that our 2023 budget for debt service needs would be accurately submitted by the budget adoption deadline. With that said, on tonight's call, we have Jason Tanzel and Sean McGill with Baker Tilly, our financial advisors, and they will discuss the financial implications of this bond issuance.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Mrs. Wilson. My name is Jason Tanzel with Baker Tilly. With me is Sean McGill, and we represent the school corporation as its municipal advisor. And as we have discussed here earlier tonight about the project scope and need, our role tonight is to explain the financial impact of issuing a $5,815,000 general obligation bond to pay for these projects, and that this bond will be paid through the school corporation's debt service fund. With that, we do have a presentation that will summarize some of the information that you have seen in your board packet within the resolutions, but it's important that tonight we keep in mind we are establishing maximums. These maximums include borrowing amount, repayment term, and interest rate. And so these are maximums we cannot exceed, but we can come down from. And so with that, we do have a 5-slide presentation that I will share my screen, and if you could give me the go-ahead that you can see my screen, unless it's easier to do so otherwise, but I will here share this presentation.
We can see it, Jason.
Wonderful, thank you. So with that, we will start the presentation. The bonds being discussed here tonight are $5,815,000, and they are general obligation bonds that would be repaid through the school corporation's debt service fund. And this is a snapshot of the school corporation's debt service fund as of today, where you can see that there are 4 bonds currently outstanding. The general obligation bonds of 2018 and the general obligation bonds of 2019 have just matured here in 2021. Each bond and its annual payment is represented by its own color, and you can see that in total, bond payments are stacked upon one another. So for example, all bond payments for Eagle County School Corporation in 2022 are just under $10 million this year. You can see that in 2023, there is a step down in debt service payments, with all bonds being repaid by 2031. And the school corporation has been diligent in pursuing a debt service structure like this, where bonds are being repaid within 3 to 5 years. Typically, these general obligation bonds that Mrs. Wilson discussed earlier have been repaid for short repayment terms under 5 years. And this short repayment term and these step down in payments allow the school corporation to potentially replace these payments for future capital projects, current capital projects that may arise. And it provides the school corporation with flexibility down the road as well. And so you can see here again, all bonds repaid by 2031, and a step down in payments in 2023 is what will allow the school corporation to issue these bonds without increasing its debt service payments or tax rate. The bonds being discussed are general obligation bonds, and there is a limitation in the state of Indiana as to how much we can issue. That limitation is 2% of 1/3 of the most recent net assessed value, which for Eagle County Schools is just over $4 billion. We also need to account the already outstanding general obligation bonds of the school corporation, and once we do that, $17,396,000 is available to be issued for a general obligation bond, and so this $5,815,000 that is being considered tonight fits within that limitation. Here we have a slide summarizing the financial characteristics that you may find within your resolutions tonight. Again, the maximum borrowing amount is $5,815,000, and after bond issuance costs, you can see that that will provide approximately $5,635,000 for the projects. We currently are estimating a repayment term of 3 years, 5 months, but within the resolutions before you, there is flexibility for that repayment term to be 4 years if need be. Using current interest rate estimates, you can see we are estimating an interest expense of $465,000. Within the resolutions tonight, there is a maximum interest rate of 5%. And most importantly, at the bottom, you can see that total annual payments are not increasing above current levels, and that because of that, we are not estimating a debt service tax rate increase. The 2022 debt service tax rate is 21.87 cents, and we are estimating the 2023 debt service tax rate to be at the same level. Our fifth and final slide, before I turn it back over to the school corporation if there are any questions, is a visual here that summarizes the repayment term that the school corporation is considering, where you can see the blue bars represent the proposed repayment structure of the $5,815,000, and that is the 3-year repayment term as discussed, and that payments are not increasing above 2022 levels, and thus we are not projecting a debt service tax rate increase. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have, or I can turn it back over to Mrs. Wilson.
At this time, I don't have any public comments on this. So if there is a motion for approval and a second to open discussion,
I'll make the motion for approval.
I'll second that.
a motion from Mrs. Wise and a second from Mr. Irwin.
Are we gonna do all three at once, or are we doing them separately, Mrs. Wilson?
I don't think that there's any criteria that says that you can't do them all at one time. I don't think there's any problem with that. I will say that all three resolutions in this evening's packet deal with exactly what has been presented. As we said, this is the sixth in a series of general obligation bonds, and we would anticipate these bonds to address HVAC, roofing, technology, equipment, paving, and any other building needs that arise, but those are our basic uses of these bonds. Mr. Tanzel laid out the parameters of the repayment. You can see it's a 3-year payback. I believe the 5 months that he indicated, 3 years and 5 months, are the 5 months in this year that we wouldn't pay, so it extends out 3 years. And the last resolution deals with the reimbursement of expenses. If we are to incur any expenses prior to receiving those bond proceeds, that we would be able to reimburse ourselves if we had any cost of issuance or anything ahead of time. So those are the three resolutions that are in your packet. And again, we will be discussing this at the next couple of board meetings so that we go through the whole entire process.
I would also add to that, if you recall, 5 of these last 6 have also been reviewed by the Bond Steering Committee. The Bond Steering Committee not only reviews in situations like this, but as we bring projects to a close, they do so and really communicate back to this board how the dollars were spent, were they spent appropriately, and I think you will have found that in each case where we've had the Bond Steering Committee that has been the case, and we will provide that same type of oversight for this project as well.
The resolutions also were prepared this evening that are in your packet, were prepared by Ice Miller, who acts as our bond counsel and works with Baker Tilly.
So the motion that we have on the floor is to accept, is to approve at all of them, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I have a quick point of clarification. And this may be for Baker Tilly, it may be for Mrs. Wilson. Just the $17 million that's available to us under that cap, you know, when it's explained in terms of this particular GO bond, could we just flesh that out a little bit more so we understand, like, because it gets confusing. It looks like the $5 million could be like part of, like, we are adding up to that, or is it just every time there's a GO bond, it could be up to 17 million? Do you see my question?
I do, and that is an excellent question. Here, the general obligation bonding capacity, this is a rolling calculation where in Indiana, the municipalities have access to 2 separate types of bonds. There are general obligation bonds, and there are bonds through a building corporation or holding corporation. And this bond being a general obligation bond, there is this limitation, as you mentioned, the $17 million, but that does change annually as far as assessed values change. And also, as general obligation bonds mature, you do get that capacity back. Because, for example, if the school corporation did not have any general obligation bonds, there would be over 27 million of general obligation capacity available to the school corporation. But that the building corporation bonds would allow the school corporation to issue other bonds in addition to this.
So for instance, the Otter Creek bond was not included, did not affect this calculation because it was a building corporation bond issuance. It was not a general obligation bond. Does that clarify it all? We have a certain amount of capacity, we can't exceed that capacity.
Okay.
And
so
each
we're
time we
adding-
do one of these, we have to recalculate.
Okay, okay, thank you.
And to answer that question, you are adding general obligation bonds to this, yes. So
Yes.
after this issuance, that 17,396,000 would decrease. If the board were to elect to move forward, it would decrease by 5,815,000.
So we're down under
Right,
12.
understood, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I would love for either Dr. Hayworth or maybe Mr. Newport, who's out there, to address just how this affects our maintenance plan on our facilities, because I think the general population is very, very interested in hearing about that, and I know that you spoke to, you know, a few of the topics, but we have a robust maintenance plan for our facilities, and this is how we're addressing executing that plan. I would love for that to go, for the public to hear how that marries up.
And we could probably do that better at the next meeting, but the short version of that is what we've been doing the last, my 4 years here. We've been using the GEO bond to address things that are not easily seen. So over the course of the last 5 years, we have been doing roofing projects. We have been doing plumbing projects. We have been doing HVAC projects. We've been doing pavement projects, those ongoing maintenance pieces, consistently using the GEO program. We hope to continue that, and now what will enter the mix is doing that with the high schools, and how do we use this capacity as we move forward with our high schools. You know, the high schools received a lot of attention over the last year and a half in regards to a perceived lack of maintenance. It's really because we knew that we were coming with a question for the high schools to address them all at once. But we have not stopped in our pursuit of taking care of all of our other facilities. And so we could even outline what projects occur when at another meeting, so that you could actually see the scope of work that's been performed.
That'd be great, thank you.
So we'll ask John Newport to do that at our next board.
Are there any other questions or comments from the board? We do have a motion on the table and a second. All those in favor of adopting GEO bonds A, B, and C signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Motion passes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Sean, thanks for standing during the pledge. That was not lost on me.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, take care, guys. I never thought about it. When you're online and they say the pledge, do you stand
Yeah.
while you're on?
I'm just curious if he had an American flag in his office or what he's looking at.
He gets extra points for trying.
I would make a motion to adjourn the public hearing for the general obligation bond and at the same time open our regularly scheduled board meeting.
I'll second that.
We have a motion to adjourn and open the regular meeting in a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstention? Thank you. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting scheduled for this evening. I'll start by our vision and mission statement. Our vision is working together with our community. We inspire our students to discover their talents and rise to their greatest potential. Our mission is building on the strengths of our diverse community. We create an engaging, comprehensive educational environment that supports the growth of lifelong learners. I'd like to move to our consent agenda.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
A motion by Mr. Irwin, a second by Mrs. Lord. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstention. Passes. Next is our June accounts payable docket from the Finance Committee. I'm sorry, yes, okay. I know we met this week. I was not able to attend, and so thank you to Ms. Scott for attending in my absence. Appreciate that. Everyone always willing to step in when needed.
Questions that we had at that time were answered by the committee. So we appreciate that always. It's very, it helps us to understand exactly where the finances need to go and what the services are.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion to approve and a second to approve the accounts payable docket. All those in favor signify.
Madam President, could I just, I'm going to vote an abstention tonight because my employer's payment, their annual fee is in the finance docket. I just wanted to make that clear so that everyone understood why I'm doing that.
Thank you, Mrs. Lord. Well, we do have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and abstention. Aye.
Aye, to abstain? I've never done that before.
I think you said me instead of I.
Thank you. Now we move to new business, the personnel report and professional leave request. Mr. Michael Cox.
President Killian, Superintendent Hayworth, members of the Board of Trustees, administration seeks approval of personnel professional leave report with attached amendment as presented.
I'll make a motion to accept the personnel report as, and professional leave request as amended.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? Well, with, all those in favor of accepting the personnel report and professional leave request signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and abstain, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the 2022-23 school year meal prices. Mr. Tom Linkus.
President Killian, Dr. Hayward, members of the board, the food service department is requesting an increase in lunch prices for both breakfast and lunch for the next school year. This is due to, of course, everything we've seen at the grocery store and around that food prices are increasing quite dramatically. And with us losing the free lunches for everybody next year, we're going to look at trying to hedge our bets a little bit and increase our lunch prices.
That was gonna be my question, was is there any chance of that returning, but I think you just answered that question for me.
It really looks slim, but when it first happened a year and a half ago was in September. So there's always hope that they still could do that, but Congress is still fighting back and forth on it. They did have a increase in reimbursement rates that they just passed, which will be helpful, but not near what we've been doing the last 2 years. So.
Thank you.
I'll move approval for the increase in school, meal prices.
A second.
And a second by Mr. Irwin. At this time, we would normally take public comment, but no one has signed up. Are there any other questions or comments from the board on this topic?
So we've missed several years where probably this would have happened in between time. Is that?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Part of what happens is that when the reimbursements from the state or the federal government go up, we have to do what they call a meal equity program. So we raise prices to match what they have increased their reimbursement. When we had free lunch for everybody, we didn't have to do any. The minimum is 10 cents. So that's why we picked that amount. We really didn't know what our new reimbursement rates would be until just recently, and even it's figured out at the federal level, not at the state level yet, so we'll see what happens with that.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and abstain. Next, we have the bid for cafeteria supplies and food. Mr. Linkus.
Again, we're asking for approval for our vendors that we have. You have that information in front of you. We sent those out. We are what we call rolling over our bid one more time due to the uncertainty of what's happening in the markets, that we want to have trusted vendors that we do know. We ask them to submit their current prices for the next school year. In doing that, this is what we've come up with, and also gave us a good indication of what we need to do with meal prices a little bit too. Increases are dramatic in paper goods, plastics, so those kind of areas has been really significant right off the bat. The other has been chain supply has been an issue for us trying to get items, and it's we're lucky we have local vendors, because we'll have B&B call up and say, hey, we just got a truckload of chicken patties, do you want them? And we will get them all delivered at one time, where we have an advantage, I think, over some of the other schools in the area.
I'll move approval of the bid for the cafeteria and supplies.
I'll second.
At this time, there are no public comments signed up. Are there any other discussion or questions from the board?
I'm assuming since it's a rollover that we've been pleased with our current vendors and their performance. And
We have, in fact, we rolled over everybody except for our bread company. We had Aunt Millie's Bakery decided they are no longer going to do schools, and we could not get a supplier. So we're getting frozen bread coming in from B&B and using that product. We tested it out, it works very well. We'll be able to hold it long enough to be able to serve our kids, but it's been tough with the vendors and things. But yes, we've been very pleased with them. We've had some issues, but like everybody, it's supply issues. They can't get the product in, so we'll find somebody else to do it. And, but the local guys, it seems like it's been beneficial for us.
Like, my question was answered about if they are local and you had done that and you're very happy with our local vendors. So again, I think that's a great partnership that we do have with our
Yes.
community.
Yeah, and we feel very confident with them, and I know they hold us, I don't want to say take care of us first, but we hope they do. Because they're local.
Are there any other comments or questions? We have a motion and a second to approve the bid for cafeteria supplies and food. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and abstain, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the AdTech E-rate agreement. Mr. Doug Miller.
Good evening, President Killian, Dr. Hayworth, and members of the board. I'm requesting your approval of an E-rate consulting agreement with AdTech for Category 1 services for funding years 2023, 2024, and 2025. The cost for Category 1 services per year is $14,150. Multi-year contracts are under the same terms and conditions and pricing per year. And we have historically used AdTech for these consulting services. And I'd like to request your approval tonight to move forward with that contract.
Move approval of the AdTech E-rate agreement as presented by Mr. Miller.
I'll second that.
At this time, there are no public comments signed up. We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
How many years have we used AdTech?
Before I was doing this job, many years.
Are you able to just describe a little bit of what exactly AdTech does provide as their service?
Yeah, so there's so many rules with E-rate, right? You need to do it right, and so there's a proper process to go through with the bids, and it's coaching. AdTech offers that coaching to make sure we do things properly, that we write the RFPs properly, and include as many vendors in the bidding as possible. There's a lot of paperwork that has to go along with that documentation, and that's the help that we get, good coaching and documentation, as well as if there was an audit, they would offer support there also.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? We have a motion and a second to approve the AdTech E-rate agreement. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, and abstain, same sign. Thank you. Neola policies, Superintendent Hayward.
No action required, just information. The policy committee has completed its work. And according to our old policy, the presentation from the policy committee to the board represents the first reading. And so the board, you do have access, and for those of you that are struggling to get online to see those policies, we will work that out for you tomorrow. I don't know why some of you are and some of you aren't. It looks like we're going to 2 different web pages, so we'll get that worked out. We then plan to bring the next reading on July 11th, and then the final reading on July 25th. Therefore, we would be starting the school year with a new policy book in order, which represents, I don't know how long, 2.5 years? Maybe longer than that. We've started on this mission, so got interrupted by COVID, but glad to be getting to this point. What that means for us moving forward is that policy will become a regular agenda item. And in one board meeting, it will appear as new business, as a first reading if we have to update a policy, and then the next meeting it would be presented as old business to update that policy officially. So excited to be to this point, but still a lot of work that has to happen, along with the policy updates that we will now be considering. The administrative team is busy working on administrative guidelines for each one of those policies. So actual nuts and bolts of how that's carried out at the district level. And so the policy committee's work is never done, so they will be also reviewing those administrative guidelines. So, but happy to be to this point. So, no action required.
Thank you for the work the policy committee and the administrative team are conducting. At this time, it's comments, correspondence, and information. Call for citizen comments, which I don't have any signed up. So we will move forward with information from our superintendent and board members.
The one thing that I would point out, if you remember last year, we began the process of identifying young student leaders to attend a leadership conference. We have recently mailed those out to student leaders representing all 3 high schools. We plan at the end of July to do a very similar activity, a 3-day conference for those leaders, equipping them with hopefully some skills on how to lead within their buildings and how to use those skills once they graduate as well. That will happen in relationship to 2 organizations that are really assisting us. One is the Chamber, and the other is the Community Foundation. And so happy to be partnering with them and happy to get this next group started.
Thank you. Is there any other information from board members that they would like to share?
I have something. I was reminded this month that it's the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And that's a big deal for the whole United States, big deal for Indiana. But the biggest deal for us in Beagle County, because as most of us know, the father of Title IX is Senator Birchby. And we're on his side of the river today, so I thought we should all remember him and say thank you for the, probably at this point, millions of women that enhanced their lives through Title IX.
Thank you for sharing that.
I'd like to say too that I think it was North High School Social Studies team won the state competition, and it was like in April, I believe, or May, but we really did not recognize that tremendously. So I'm hoping maybe in the future they could, maybe when school comes back, as a matter of fact, with the summer, so many students gone, but that we could have them come and recognize them, because it was quite an honor and hard competition.
Thank you.
We could have our own history quiz bowl.
I don't
I
know
will
about
that.
that. And I idea.
We should
No, I
pick a topic
totally-
if we do that. Can we pick this topic?
We're the judges.
Yeah. I would love to have more students in that we could recognize and give congratulations to. Next, committee reports from board members.
We had, committees met, but we kind of already went over it, the
We
finance
did.
committee and policy committee, so.
And bond steering.
And bond steering.
I did have someone ask me, they're like, don't you get the summer off? And I said, no, the work does not stop.
Yeah.
I just appreciate everyone's time and effort that they put in coming to the committees and just putting in that effort to help advance our corporation.
And the citizens that we have involved with our bond committee, we are always grateful to them, because a lot of them bring expertise from years of their employment or things that they've been involved with, and they always have good information.
I agree.
And thank you for that. Our future meeting will be Monday, July 11th, here in the administration building at 6 p.m. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
So,
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion for meeting adjourned.